Welcome to my channel. I'm here to share another piece of my story with you guys. So I'm going to be sharing with you part of my story. Like I said, I'm gonna starting a series on the story that I need to share with you all of how unworthiness played out in my life. Okay. As a child, first of all, we need to understand something. The feeling of unworthiness is not only what we experience in our lifetime, in this lifetime. It can also be a feeling that has been sent from a generation prior to the next. In my family, I come from a long line of women who had received way early on in their lives female mutilation, which means that from the region that I come from originally, all the lines of women that came before me, like my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmothers, on both sides of the family, all went through this tradition, which was female mutilation, or cutting off a part of the clitoris. Now, I'm saying this because when you do get mutilated as early as 3 years old, 4 years old, there is a big part of you that becomes numb to feeling, that becomes numb to pleasure. You completely dissociate. I'm gonna have a whole video just talking about the psychological, emotional, physical effects that happens when women are mutilated. Okay, the same can apply to men with circumcision, but I'm gonna leave it at that. Okay, I'm gonna have a whole video to break down the trauma that is beneath it and that really causes damage in the long run, right? It's intergenerational damage that is being caused. So the reason why I say that the underlying feeling here is unworthiness, when you know, from my mother, from my great-grandmother to my mother to me, that feeling of unworthiness has been passed down from her to me. Why? Because she was, her experience, her feeling about herself, she experienced trauma or pain at a very, very young age. And that left an imprint on her about her own identity, her own sensuality, her own sexuality, her own sense of worth, her pleasure, how she identifies with her body. How can she identify with her body? Is her body really hers? A sense of betrayal has been implanted deeply into her subconscious, or even her conscious mind. So I did not go through female mutilation. Okay, I can say that I haven't gone through with it, although I was actually sent to my country back home to go through that procedure. But somehow, some way, I had protection around me. I had probably spirit guides, because me and my sister, we fell ill for the whole 2 weeks that we were there. So we had mosquito bites and we could not get through with that procedure. So we had to come back to the foreign country where we live. But that does not take away the fact that this feeling of unworthiness that was deeply rooted in my mom's, since her mothers and 4 mothers before that, that feeling of unworthiness has been so embedded in her identity, in her genes, that it has been passed down to me. Okay, so even me coming out into this world as a young born baby, as a young born little girl, I was carrying that deep-seated root of unworthiness. Okay, so that was the first imprint, or that was the first, some people call it epigenetics. So you can dig into that furthermore, but it mainly says that the experiences that you have throughout a lifetime, the feelings that you felt throughout your lifetime, you are going to pass some of them to your children. So if you were in a constant state of fear, in a constant state of pain, in a constant state of unworthiness, you will be passing that on to your children. So that was my first encounter with the feeling of unworthiness. So I was carrying already, as soon as I land foot in this world, this 3D reality, I had this burden of unworthiness with me. The second encounter for me being exposed to that feeling of unworthiness is me having to go through molestation. So I was molested at a very young age, around the same time as my mother was mutilated. So around 3-4 years old, I was molested by a family friend for years. Okay, it was ongoing for maybe 3 to 5 years. And the way I carry that pain, I totally dissociated from it. Okay, there are some things that I'm going to share with you in the videos that I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time over, but it will be broken down. Okay, I just want you to get the storyline so that you get the story, because the message needs to come out and people need to hear this. People need to listen to this. So I was molested. So I was carrying a lot of trauma. I was carrying trauma from my mom. I was carrying trauma from my dad, because my dad had to witness his dad being killed in front of him at 18 years old. That was another trauma that was passed on to me. So the feeling of unworthiness was well rooted deeply into my genes, deeply into my subconscious. And not only that, the experience of unworthiness that I literally individually went through with my own personal trauma in my youthful years, that also shaped me into believing that I was deemed unworthy on so many other levels. For the moment that I was molested, and then I got out of it, first of all, just the molestation part, okay, it took me 30 years, okay, it took me like maybe 2 years ago, from the moment I'm talking to you guys, 2 years ago, to realize that I had been molested. So I had developed this dissociation, I had developed this amnesia to my own personal trauma. So that was my mind, that was my brain helping me to completely dissociate from that part of the story that was so painful. That was me dealing with my trauma. I had locked it in a box within my brain, and I had thrown the keys. And I was like, I don't want to deal with it. It never happened. Let's move on. But because the brain can only, the brain can forget or try to forget, but the body does not, right? And so in me growing up, I always felt like I was not worthy of being loved. My parents divorced at a very early time. I was 5 years old when they separated. Actually, my mom left. She left my dad and us 3 siblings, 3 girls behind, and she went back to my country. Now, I don't know what are the reasons till this day. I don't know. But when she left, right? She probably came back like 20 years later, okay? So the separation, my parents' separation, the trauma from childhood, and the passed down traumas from both my mom and dad had already set a foundation for me to feel unworthy in all kinds of ways. So because of that underlying trauma that I had forgotten or that I had locked away, I felt deeply unworthy of being loved, of being looked after, of feeling secure within my own skin, within my own body, of knowing that, I can't be, I have to be protected, or I'm deemed to be protected. Like, I had no sense of value, no sense of worth. This is how much I was walking on earth prior to me coming into myself, I would say within the next year or so. Within the next year, or no, not yet next, but previous year. So it took me about a year from now. So from me talking to you guys, it took me a year from now to realize that I had been walking with heavy, heavy burdens, heavy traumas, intergenerational traumas, personal trauma, individual trauma, and that had allowed a lot of people to come into my space. I had allowed a lot of people, a lot of energies, and a lot of entities to get stuck onto me, because I had this belief that I was unworthy. I was unworthy of being. I was unworthy of feeling. I was unworthy of existing. I felt unworthy on all levels. And so I'm going to leave it to you here. Okay, I'm going to leave this video here. And so I want you to go back into your story. Go back into your parents' story. Remember, or ask questions. Where were your parents hurt? What trauma do they carry? Or what trauma was passed down from both your parents onto you? What was their story? What story did they tell you? What's the truth behind it? And then also look at your own personal story. What trauma did you carry from your youthful years, if any? And it doesn't have to be, trauma can be different from one person to another. Some people can carry heavy traumas and some cannot. Like some, there are levels to this, okay? So, I don't want to undermine or minimize the level of traumas that are being carried on this earth. I feel like trauma is trauma. Some trauma is good. It's going to help you, learn from your mistake. Like a child that learns how to walk, he's going to fall down. He's going to pick himself back up again, and he's going to walk again. Those are little traumatizing moments, but that helps you to progress. And then there are those trauma that hit you harder. But if you can heal through them, they are going to propel you to rise even higher than what you expected. So I hope this helped. Reflect. Take some time. Write it down. What are the trauma that you've been carrying? And I'll see you in the next video.